April 9th was the last day of the conference. Mimi and Blythe leave on the Titanic that morning, while Emma, Amelie, Mother, and I tickets to sail on the 12th for another ship. We would meet Blythe and Mimi in New York. Your European trip is over, so you will be coming back to Spirit with us. I asked that evening as we walked along the boardwalk. She wouldn't meet my eye. I don't know. It depends. On what? On how things are going with Victor. I sigh. Suit yourself, I grumbled. Now she looked straight at me. Don't be that way, Jane. Why do you have to make it harder than it is already? It's not hard for you, I countered angrily. You just do as you please. You dumped me off on a strange city and then left me to go home alone and face the consequences. We went there for your sake, in case you don't remember. She came back at me. And you met Thad. You ran off to lunch with him, as I recall. Yes, lunch, Mimi, not Europe. I don't understand, she insisted. I understand selfishness when I see it. I don't know what made me be so peevish with her. But maybe I do. It was the idea of her leaving again. Tomorrow she would be gone, and she was telling me she didn't know if she was ever coming back. And this time she was taking Blythe with her. Even though I'd see Blythe again in New York, the whole thing just gave me a bad feeling. Mimi turned and walked away back towards Agatha's without even waiting for me. The rest of the evening we were icy to each other. Everyone must have noticed as we were having Agatha's trifle pudding for dessert. But I'd been outspoken enough about my feelings, so I suppose it pretty much figured out what was going on. Mr. Stead had invited us to breakfast in the morning. I hoped you girls would be civil with each other and not ruin the event, Mother cautioned. Mimi and I didn't look at each other, but stared down at our desserts without responding. Darlings, remind me to get a petrol in the morning for a trip to the dock, said Agatha. I'm sorry, dear, I forgot to tell you. William, Mr. Stead, will accompany them to the train to Southampton, Mother said. He also is leaving tomorrow on the Titanic. President Taft himself mailed him a first-class passenger ticket directly from the White House. You won't be seeing us off? Blythe questioned, pouting. We'll say our goodbyes as Mr. Stead's conference house. It will be only for a few days, Mother said. Almost a week, Blythe corrected her. Mimi pushed her chair back and picked up her dish. I'm not quite finished packing. How about you, Blythe? I'm in a desperate need of help, she replied. Do you think I could borrow you for some of your things? Nighty bought you such pretty clothing, and I'm almost your size. Not nearly, I put in, and they both shot me a look of annoyance. I have a few dresses you could borrow, Emma offered. And you have some nice ones, Amelie. Could Blythe borrow some? Amelie looked up from her pudding and nodded. Blythe smiled was forced. Thank you both. But I'm sure Mimi has more clothing than she could ever pack. Mimi sighed a tolerant exasperation. Later, we'll go see what I got. Agatha, Mother said, stirring her tea in a distracted way, as Emma and Amelie and I took our dishes to the kitchen. Have you ever read anything about the author named Morgan Robertson? Agatha tilted her head thoughtfully. I can't say that I have, darling. He was at the conference, a charming man. I only just met him, and I can't recall reading any of his books. But his name seems so familiar, and I can't simply stop racking my brain trying to remember where I know it from. Why does it matter so much? I asked, returning to the parlor. I'm not sure, Mother answered absently, clearly still spewing on the question. It just seems important for some reason. I'm sure it'll come to you, Agatha comments. That reminds me, Mother said, looking at Mimi and Blythe. Be cordial to Mr. Stead on the ship, girls, but do not occupy too much of his time. When I told him you would be on the Titanic, Mr. Stead did his utmost to convince me that it was not a good idea, to urge me to have you take another ship. I can't, Mimi cried. I must take the Titanic with Natalie and Mr. Gunningham. They're my employers. I'm being paid to keep Natalie company. And I don't want to take some dumpy old dull ship, Blythe pulled out. To travel on the Titanic is a chance of a lifetime. And I wouldn't be fair to prevent me from going. Why did he say that? He wouldn't say. But mainly socially prominent people will be on board. Only reason I think it could be that he wants to be free of associates with them without being distracted by looking out for your welfare. We won't bother him, Mimi assured Mother, but there's no chance that we would pass up this trip. That is what I told him, Mother said. It's strange for him to object so much to their presence on the ship, I remark. He'd been so friendly to us during the conference that it seemed out of character for me. It struck me as a bit odd as well, Mother agreed. He ended our conversation with a particular statement. He said Mimi is a woman and Blythe would be considered a child. That will affect the outcome. When I asked him what outcome he was referring to, he brushed it off, saying he was just working out a problem in his head. We arrived at Mr. Stead's breakfast at 7:30 in the morning on April 10th. Mr. Stead was entering a building as we pulled up, jammed into Agatha's motor car. He explained that he had gone to his home in the country to spend the night before his departure with his wife and child. It was a lovely buffet spread, and we ate it heartily. We were not the only ones there. Agatha joined us at Mr. Stead's invitation. Quite a number of other guests attended, but they were all in their way by 9. Mimi and Blythe were dressed to travel, their suitcases stowed in the front lobby closet. Blythe was like a baby peacock strutting in her finery, navy blue jacket and a blue sailor-style dress, with a dropped waist, both borrowed from Mimi. Her brimmed hat was truly cute. Mimi was the picture of elegance in a rose-broached, ankle-length dress and a solid rose jacket. Mr. Stead was quiet during breakfast. I assumed he tried from the rigor of the conference, or maybe apprehensive of the upcoming peace conference. We all left the buffet table, and at Mr. Stead's invitation joined him in the study to await the horse cab that he ordered to take to Waterloo Station. From there they would take the train to the Titanic. Study was lined with bookcases and papers. I've slowly brought so many things from home, he commented. When he saw me looking at them, somehow I shall have to get all of it back to the country when I return from the United States and give up on my lease on this place. Have you learned anything valuable from the conference? Mother asked. Your daughter have convinced me that there will indeed be a world war. Now I believe that Mr. Taft's attempt at the sidestep to prevent it will probably be in vain. Why go then? I asked. One must try one's best despite the evidence, he replied sadly. It is always possible that we do affect the future. It may be that the future where we do nothing there will be a war. But if we try to stop it, the outcome will change. My spirit guide Julia has implied as much to me, although she hasn't stated it directly. At the very least, perhaps the misery of the lesson ensured due to our efforts, one may always try. You are a good man, Mother told him. I am just a man with many questions, he replied. All my life I have been driven to seek answers. It heartened me to hear him say that since I too had millions of questions and took nothing for granted, and was always seeking. Something I thought sometimes must be a particular about me that I was so driven. To hear Mr. Stead say he felt the same made me see myself as less odd. Much less encouraging was his conviction that Emma and Amelie, or shall I say Queen Victoria, had convinced him the war was coming. I didn't want to think about what the world at war would look like. Soon the horse-drawn cab arrived to take Mr. Stead, Mimi, and Blythe to their ship. We shall see you soon, Mother bid them goodbye with hugs. Mimi, you watch out for Blythe. She won't have to, Blythe objected. I will, Mimi promised, speaking over Blythe. I hugged Blythe goodbye, but when Mimi approached for a hug, I didn't make a move to enfold her in my arms. Goodbye, Mimi, I said softly, avoiding her hurt gaze. I suppose I'll see you in New York. Come, ladies, Mr. Stead urged. Our cab awaits. Mother, Agatha, Emma, and Amelie went out to say goodbyes at the cab, but I stayed behind in the study, dropped into a high-bagged leather armchair. Now that Mimi was gone, I let my anger at her become what it had truly been all along, bitter sadness and disappointment. Dropping my head, I began to cry. Minutes later, someone entered the study, and I quickly brushed my tears away. It was Mr. Robertson, inquiring for Mr. Stead. You missed him, I'm afraid. He left for the Titanic. He nodded somberly. So he decided to go after all. What do you mean? I asked, suddenly alarmed by the seriousness in his expression. He held a large paper envelope tied in string. He placed it in Mr. Stead's desk and began to untie it. As he worked the string, Mother, Agatha, Emma, and Amelie returned. Mother gasped sharply when she produced the contents of the envelope. Now I remember why your name is so familiar, she cried. I read that book on the train from New York to Buffalo many years ago. Standing, I looked to see what Mr. Robinson held, and a slim novel with a picture of the ocean liner on the cover. The title was Fertility. In the novel, the ocean liner sinks. Am I correct, Mother recalled? I'm afraid it does, Mr. Robinson confirms. She leaned heavily on the desk, as though she needed it for just support to keep her from fainting. And the ship is named the Titan. Yes, he said. I urged Dad not to travel on it. He himself had made the precautions of his own death by drowning. It preoccupied him for many years. He never spoke of it to me, Mother said. I thought it was ice he feared. He entertained both possibilities. It was a matter of public record. In 1886, he wrote the article titled How the Mail Steamed Went Down in the Mid-Atlantic by a Survivor. He strode to the bookshelf and pulled down the magazine. Reviews of reviews. Mr. Stead had founded and edited. This was the story he wrote in 1892, featuring a character that was clairvoyant. He quickly found the pages and wanted to begin to read. I was saying, said Mr. Irwin. Last night I was laying asleep. In my breath, I was awakened by a sudden cry of a man in mortal peril. I arose myself to listen, and there before my eyes, as plain as you sitting there, I saw a sailing ship among the icebergs, and she had been stove by the ice and was fast sinking. A quaver in Mother's voice made me realize she was trembling. An iceberg, you say? Yes. The ship collides with an iceberg and sinks, Mr. Robinson said. What is the name of the ship the book is about? Emma asked. The Majestic, Mr. Robinson told her. The Majestic Titanic. It was too close for me to feel comfortable about it, and I clung to logic. There is no sense in jumping to irrational, panicked conclusions. Think about it, I say, trying to convey a cool rationality. I didn't really feel. This ocean liner had been growing bigger and bigger steadily, and could be the cause for concern. Icebergs are known hazardous in the northern Atlantic, and these ships have all the names similar. The Gigantic, the Olympic. It's logical. Anyone to think that the nature of these liners might come up with a similar scenario as these. I took a concluding breath, and thus satisfied with my dispassionate assignment of the situation. Sherlock Holmes, if not Conan Doyle, would have been proud. This sounds sensible, my dear, said Mr. Robinson, but the Titanic is considered unsinkable. If there is not an element of superstition, prophecy, and clairvoyance in the stories, why would there be an unsinkable ship sinking? It's only fear, I suggested. When I wrote Fertility, it came to me like a waking dream. There was nothing logical about it, Mr. Robinson insisted. It's the fourth prophecy, Mother said. Mr. Robinson, much alarmed, in his speech the other day. He said he was documenting a fourth prophecy. This has to be it. I believe you are correct, madame. He said and discussed this only 2 nights ago. He pulled out a top drawer of Mr. Stead's desk and took out the hardcover sketch pad. He showed me these drawings he'd been making while in a trance state in the course of the last 10 years. He was quite a good artist, but they hardly had the point here. He opened the book of Mr. Stead's sketches and showed Mother. A tortured, anguished cry came from her. Dropping the book, she covered her face in her hands. Agatha rushed for support while she wilted to the side. Frightened and overcome by curiosity, I retrieved the book. Emma and Amelie cowered me on either side, looking down at the pages of the charcoal sketches along me, and I slowly turned them. One drawing was a full-length self-portrait of Mr. Stead, failing helplessly under the water, his suit and tie floating around him. Another sketch showed a gigantic ocean liner sinking, back half standing straight up in the 90-degree angle. The third depicted an iceberg with some people climbing onto it while others floated in the frigid ocean. Let's go right now, I cried. All my misgivings about clairvoyance swept aside. We can't let Mimi and Blythe get on that ship.